and welcome. I'm Allison Sosha, the 2023 president of the Greater Boston Association of Realtors. Today, I'm delighted to have two guests for this segment of GBAR Conversations, during which we will discuss the issue of rent control, as well as the efforts being undertaken by our industry to address our housing crisis and increase the production of housing. First, we have Daphne Fields, a realtor with Gibson Sotheby's International Realty in Boston, and this year's chairperson of the Greater Boston Real Estate Board's Government Affairs Committee. Also happy to welcome Patricia Baumer, our longtime Government Affairs Director for GREB. Thank you both for joining me today. Trish, let's start with you. Can you provide us with a brief overview of the legislative initiatives filed which propose rent control?
So thank you, Allison, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. Happy to talk about some of these issues. Maybe provide a little bit of political context. So we are at the beginning of a 2-year legislative cycle on Beacon Hill. Right now, there are about 7,000 pieces of legislation that are up there that are being considered, including a number of issues that are before the Housing Committee. There are probably about half a dozen or so rent control bills that are up there right now. So those bills they have been introduced, and they will go through the normal course of business up on Beacon Hill, assigned to committee, and then go through the public hearing process, which we anticipate will probably be this fall. Senator Lydia Edwards has indicated in public comments to the media that it'll probably be in October. We don't have a firm date on when some of those bills will be heard, but that we anticipate that they'll go through the normal course of business and be scheduled for a public hearing at some point in the future.
Now, Senator Edwards is the person who is chairing the Housing Committee work.
So they have two, every committee it's a joint committee, and they have two House and Senate chairmen. So Chairman James Osero is the House chairman, and then Lydia Edwards is the Senate chairman. So they do joint committees together. So they will typically, not always the case as we've seen this year, but they typically will hold hearings together. So.
That's excellent. So we're crossing both sides of the different houses, and we're able to meet them right where they are. Yep. Thanks for that. Now, not surprisingly, the Boston rent control proposal has garnered much of the attention to date, with good reason. And it does more than just propose a restriction on rents. There are other provisions. Isn't that right, Trish?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of attention that's been paid to the rent control proposal in terms of the number, the CPI plus 6. What is the amount of rent that would be capped in the city of Boston? Sort of along the lines of what people would think of traditional rent control was when traditional rent control was here in Massachusetts. The mayor of Boston has taken a whole new approach to rent control, and in addition to rent control, she's added 3 other provisions to the bill. So I think it's important that members understand that in addition to rent control, there are other provisions in the bill, most notably regulating condominium conversions. So for those who certainly broker condominiums in the city of Boston, it will impact the ability to build condominiums. There's a provision in there that's regulating condominiums. There's a provision about demolition delay. So if you have a property that's been burned in a fire and that property needs to come down, what happens to that property in terms of demolition delay? And the last piece of that is limiting your ability to recover your property. It's very explicit in terms of eviction rules. So what would happen in certain circumstances if you had somebody in your property and you needed to recover that property for whatever reason it might be. It's now adding what they call just cause eviction provisions. So it's really restricting the owner's ability to recover that property. So I think it's important as members think about and learn about the mayor's proposal, I think it's important that they understand that this isn't sort of your mother's rent control. This isn't the 1994 strict cap on rents. There's more to it than meets the eye.
Sure. So it really kind of infringes on private property homeowner rights.
Certainly, there's that's why you read the bill, right?
Yeah.
That's why you have to dig into the details. I think sometimes in the headlines it's easy to get caught up in what is the percentage of rent. She's going to exempt properties that are under 15 years old, and that there's certain exemptions built, and those are all parts of the rent part. But I think it's important that people understand that this is exceeding what they proposed in 1994.
Thanks, Trish. Now, Daphne, has the Greater Boston Real Estate Board taken a position on the various rent control proposals? And then how is the real estate industry, and specifically GREB, addressing these legislative measures and other efforts while considering what's happening in the cities and towns bringing back rent control?
Thanks, Allison. So yes, the quick and very specific answer is we have taken a position and we are against rent control. And we're against because it has been proven not to work. It has been tried many times over, including, as we know, here in Massachusetts, and it has failed. It is unfortunately not the way to really create more housing and create more affordable housing. And so, that's really what we've been focusing on here for over 20 years. In fact, GREB has been very actively involved in working collaboratively with various administrations, being part of work groups to find solutions that actually will work. And more importantly than anything, we're very much focused on educating both our members and the public, because I think that without understanding the nuances, as Trish just explained, it is easy to assume that this is a solution because we all care about this matter, but we need to understand what the unintended consequences are. And so that's been our focus.
That's great. So we're really working to make sure we have a seat at the table and we're there representing our members and representing homeowners and tenants all across the Commonwealth.
Exactly.
Now, Trish, I understand it's not just the Massachusetts legislature that will be asked to consider a community's ability to regulate rent, but also voters might have an opportunity to do so. Can you share a little more about that?
In 2024, there might be a ballot question that goes on the ballot when we go to elect the President of the United States next year. I will preface that by saying that the process for putting something on the ballot is a lengthy process. It's lengthy, it's complicated, it's costly. It's about a 400 and something days from now when potentially you could be considering a ballot question. So it's a long process, it's a lengthy process. A state representative from Cambridge who has filed a legislation at the State House, and he filed a ballot question last week to try to meet the deadline. And the first benchmark, I guess, in that process is that it's very simple, right? You get 10 citizens, any 10 citizens can file a ballot question. All you need is 10 signatures, and you put that before Attorney General Andrea Campbell's office. So she'll be taking a look at that. So that sort of the next step in the process is to have her her office take a look at it. And then in September, we'll know if she deems that it meets, all the legal requirements in order to move ahead. And then it's a lengthy process after that. So they have to gather signatures, and it's it's a long process. So it's probably over a year from now. So we've got a long ways to go, but I think that people should understand that the first part in the process was just any 10 citizens can get together and file a ballot question.
Sure. And if I remember correctly, on our GREB advocacy page, I think there's a resources tab, right, that will actually help simplify some of these items for our members.
There's an excellent explainer video. If you go to greb.com on the advocacy section of the website, for members only, you can log in and see there is a video that was done by our firm, our PR firm, and they did an excellent job just kind of simplifying what are all the benchmarks that need to happen in terms of understanding the process. So I would encourage the members to go to greb.com advocacy section. There's a drop down about videos, and just take a look there. It's the simplest. It's about a 2-minute video, so it won't even take much time.
It's a fantastic opportunity. Daphna, as a realtor, tell us why it's so important for our members to understand this issue and, frankly, truly care about this debate over rent control. How can staying up to date help us inform our clients and our customers, and even influence ultimately how it will impact this local housing market?
Well, Allison, the reason that this is so important for us to care about is because as realtors, we care about housing. We care about the issue of affordable housing. Additionally, what is really important for us and what we always work on is private property rights. This is a situation where the government wants to come in and tell people what to do with their homes, with their properties. And we feel that that is wrong, again, because it's not the solution and because it actually will cause more harm than anything. An additional piece that people forget or haven't known about is that the broker rental fee is also coming up as a question. And so that is something that we're going to have to protect and look at carefully. So those are just a few examples of why we should all care. But ultimately, also, I think that we should remember that our own members may be tenants and landlords, And our clients are tenants and landlords. And so it is very important for all of us to understand every item here, all the intricacies of this issue, so that we can advise them.
Well, it's just such an integral part of what we do, and understanding these fine details. Thanks for calling that out. That is a modification from anything that we've seen thus far. So the emphasis that you're making sure that we're sharing and spreading that information out there, we all have to be so prepared. So Trish, help us set the stage for the legislative process, where the debate goes from here. You mentioned earlier that we'll have some hearings likely in the fall, but what would happen after the hearings? Is that something that we should even be considering kind of watching as it progresses? And how can we maybe be thinking broader and bigger about this for our members?
Absolutely. And I would just, without getting too into the weeds about the process, I would say that the process of legislation that has been filed, for example, in the city of Boston as a home rule petition, that process is going to be separate and distinct from the ballot question process. So I think it's important that people understand there's a parallel process that's happening here. There is the legislation, which will be considered in a public hearing at the State House. And then there is the separate process and distinct process that we'll go through for the ballot question. So, I always advise our members one step at a time. We take this process one step at a time. I think the first step is what people are doing, which is watching this, trying to educate themselves, understand what the issue is and why it's important to pay attention. So more to come.
Well, boy, am I grateful that we have not only an amazing government affairs team, but also a whole committee that will be able to keep their eyes on all of this and then give us those key points so that as members we're up to date, but aren't down deep too far into it, so that we know how to help educate everybody around us. So thanks for clarifying that. Now, Daphna, from an industry perspective, it's pretty clear that in order to effectively address our region's high housing costs, both in terms of rents as well as home prices, we're going to have to build our way out of this crisis. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and if GREB has any solutions for addressing this lack of affordable housing, and then really, truly addressing that creation of housing units?
Well, thank you for asking that. That is absolutely correct. The most important way out of this issue is by building additional housing units. And we're very fortunate at GREB that we actually have various divisions working together. So we have the best minds in the industry looking at finding creative solutions together and to work collaboratively with legislators in order to make these things happen. So again, in our research, we uncovered, for example, in the CPA study, we uncovered a program that's really fantastic, but is being underutilized. Another example is that we fully supported the MBTA Act. The MBTA, correct me if I'm wrong.
The
Housing Choice Law.
Passed in
That's
2020, Governor Baker's initiative.
And that's why we have an expert. And another wonderful thing about GREB is that I have these experts that I can rely on, so that it is a team. I bring, the voice of the realtors. I work with my fellow realtors, both those who are actively involved on the Government Affairs Committee, and those that are not necessarily as active but are interested and are looking to help in their own way. And together, I can lean on our specialists like Greg and Trish at GREB to help us with this.
Well, in fairness, you were not the chairman when they passed that law. That was three,
and
4
there you go.
years
So
ago.
so I'm not taking credit for it either. But
you
it
can't
was
take the credit or the blame.
But it was
in
a great
2020,
thing.
Well, I think it's so interesting that we're sort of back to our roots, because the way that GREB got started in 1889 was under this idea that we needed to get all of the stakeholders inside our real estate industry in the same space, working together and making sure that we're taking really a great, strong stance to take care of the communities and make sure that we are part of every solution and in the room where all of that might happen. Now, Trish, Daphna brought up something that our members may not be familiar with, which is our CPA study, which is the Community Preservation Act, which if you could explain a little more about that, right? Like that study right there pulled together the three parts, I believe, that make up the CPA. And if you could kind of give us a little background on that and where the rubber meets the road for all of us within GREB.
Sure. And, I would just kind of pick up a little bit of the point that Daphne was making, which is, sometimes I think people want to offer a simple solution for a complex problem, right? So rent control seems like a simple solution for a very complex problem. And Daphne alluded to it, right? It's complicated. It takes time to come up with solutions. So one of the things that we wanted to take a look at was the Community Preservation Act. Now, this law was passed 20 years ago, and it was a piece of legislation that was supported by realtors. It came out of a compromise from all the groups. It predated anybody here. None of us were here when they negotiated the Community Preservation Act. But it is a piece of legislation that allows any community who chooses to opt into the Community Preservation Act the ability to raise money for affordable housing. Now, one of the things that we wanted to take a look at is, okay, it's been 20 years since the CPA has been law. Are there opportunities to take a look at it, right? And one of the things that we were really surprised to find was that, a lot of communities are saying that they want to build affordable housing. Are they? Are they fully maximizing? Are they leaning into the tools that they have, including in the city of Boston, right? So the Community Preservation Act allows a town to decide by local vote if they want to do a property tax surcharge up to 3%, and if they want to allocate some of that money for affordable housing. So we partnered with the Tisch Center, Tufts University, Evan Horowitz, who is a very well-respected researcher, and he found that a lot of communities are not using the Community Preservation Act. They're not using the tools that they have. So we would encourage all of those communities that have the CPA to really lean into that. Perfect example is the city of Boston. Right now, I believe that the CPA rate is at 1%. If the mayor chose to lean into that, she could ask for the voters to approve an increase in the CPA. Any community that has it can do a property tax surcharge up to 3%. But I would just remind anybody that even if your community does not have the CPA, you as a taxpayer are paying for it through the matching funds that's provided by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So it is just another example of how we're trying to be proactive in terms of finding solutions, looking at things that are working. We know that the CPA is working in terms of generating housing. Again, these issues of producing housing are complicated. There's no simple fix to this. So we just thought that this was a good faith effort for us to try to move the conversation in a constructive dialogue.
Sure. So we need a lot of kind of creative opportunities in order to make sure that everyone who wants to be a part of the Commonwealth has the opportunity to live here and be really present. So it's interesting to hear that there are places that don't have it, and even some of the places that do have it, they're not addressing all of the funds usage and maybe even have a little more room to grow. So
yeah, and in addition to the ability to raise a property tax surcharge, any community can do it up to 3%. That community can also allocate. You're required a minimum of doing 10%, but you could theoretically allocate up to 80%. There's some flexibility in the program. So if a community really said, housing is the number one thing that we want to do, that they should. The other thing, and I won't get too details into the study, but I think people should be reminded of it. One of the things that we looked at in the study is that a lot of the money is just sort of being held in a housing trust, and there's a lot of question about, are these communities actually using the money that they have in a housing trust to produce housing? There's some flexibility in how they can use those funds. So that was another kind of eye-opening moment for us, was not only are they not using the 10%, but the housing trusts, there's no requirement in terms of them spending that money and where it goes. So,
Daphne, if I'm a realtor and I want to learn more about the CPA study or any of the efforts that GREB and our association have undertaken to oppose rent control, where can I go to learn more?
Well, first of all, right on the GREB website, so gbrb.com. You'll have to log in, and it was mentioned before, you'll find a lot of information there. And then there's also a public-facing website that's fantastic, and that is mahousingsolutions.com. So please read through that. And of course, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to get involved. We would appreciate it.
Well, thank you both for sharing your time and providing all this education as well as the information about the resources for our members. Thanks for joining us for another GBAR conversation, and we'll see you at the next one.